Oh, you're recording. Okay. Tell me when to start then.
So, welcome Stephen and welcome everyone. I will, yeah, now it's sounding okay. And we're very happy to have you here, Stephen, and all of you, of course, with this new session of Language is a Virus. I totally lost the track of the number, but it's 30-something. And when we're about to start recording, you were talking about this poetry project, London Under Construction, in which lots of people that are here participated about 20 years ago, right? So if you can tell us a little more about it, and then we can start with your work.
Sure. Yeah. It wasn't that long ago, actually.
Yeah.
Was it? Am I? Maybe it was. I think it was 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe. Maybe actually no. Maybe it's 2003, 2004, 2005. Anyway, yeah, there are several people here who are involved, including Aidan, who spoke last week, and that what he said last week got me thinking about the sort of work that we were doing then, which was performance work, which was very much driven by the moment of performance. And we recorded various bits of it in various ways, some of which exists, some of which doesn't exist, or rather it exists in ways that we can't access it now. And it did make me think about this notion of fragments and what fragments mean for work that is recorded in that sort of mode, performance work that exists only in its moment of generation, so to speak. And part of the ethos we had for London Under Construction was that we approached it from X number of different perspectives. So we never really had a sort of guiding principle or an agreed on approach. And our general sort of description of what we were doing, as I remember it, was that we were all sort of facing in the same direction, but not necessarily doing the same thing on any of these performances. So they were quite chaotic in many ways and quite productive of really interesting energies, or certainly that's what I felt. I think various people to different degrees kind of bought into that sort of idea among the grouping, and the grouping kind of shifted around a bit. Doug Jones was part of it, Martin Gubbins, Piers Hugel, etc., etc., etc. And we had other people who were involved in the publication, which I dug out of my box of old stuff. So this is the Ringbinder version of the first publication that we did, which was spring 2005. So it was called Reception, which was edited by Piers Hugel and Martin Gubbins, and had worked by Sean Bonney, Anna Maria Breda, Gregorio Fontaine, Martin Beccaro, Aidan McCardle, Chris Paul, Andres Wanter, Doug Jones, Harry Jalonis. I'm probably missing some names here, but anyway.
I guess I wrote one of the texts, one of the critical texts, I think.
For
From
this
Chile
one.
with Love, it was titled.
Oh yes, you're right. You did at the start. Yes, of course you did.
Yeah,
yes,
they didn't want to consider me a poet, just a critic. So I was in a lower level. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so this was in Spanish and in English,
Exactly.
And experimental translations of one kind or another, which was another thing that LUC were doing at the time. And to some degree, I think this is among the best work we did. So anyways, coming off what Aidan had said last week, and thinking about his work as fragmentary and made up of fragments that exist and fragments that don't exist, so to speak, and what the relationship of those two are, and how we can think about the ways we record those fragments and how those fragments relate to the sort of work that certainly I do now. I think it's certainly part of it. LUC, as I think Aidan said last time, came out of certainly some of our encounters with Writers' Forum and each other. I think that's where I first met the two Martins, and Piers. No, but actually Piers was in Birkbeck, I think, at the time. So we were coming from there. I never got to meet Bob Copping, unfortunately. I never managed to get to it before he died. So, but I met Jeff there. I met loads of people there actually for the first time. So we kind of jumped around off that. I think you mentioned, Martine, last week, the thing we did going out and writing kind of poetry all over the streets in chalk.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, amazing. That's the sort of energy I'm not sure I quite have anymore. But if I do, it's a different type of energy. But certainly that was
you had stickers as well, I seem to remember. You did some stickering, didn't you? Yeah.
All over the London Underground. We wrote, I think we're called look-ups, London Underground poems, something poetry, I can't remember. But we stuck them up. We got them printed out in several hundred each, and then stuck them up on the tube over the official poems on the Underground, which now would get you arrested without a shadow of a doubt. But then the legal situation was a little bit more fuzzy. So we could go around doing these sort of guerrilla kind of poetry actions. There is one perhaps not very flattering precedent to that, which I had done, where an ex-partner of mine had been in Central St. Martin's, kind of fashion student in Central St. Martin's, and had asked me to sit in place of one of his models because they hadn't turned up. So I diligently said okay, with my kind of snotty attitude towards fashion, and said okay, I'd do it under protest. And the feedback from the photographs was that the chubby guy in the photos wasn't very photogenic. I thought, oh, really? So that did not go down well. So then I kind of blitzed Central St. Martin's with a similar sort of thing of a poem that I'd written about fashion in Central St. Martin's, which I stuck up on the walls outside and the bus stops. And I emailed a particularly nasty letter to every staff member, I think, on the... I didn't email it, I posted it actually to every staff member on the faculty. So yes, not my proudest moment, but it did involve a kind of guerrilla thing of sticking poetry up. So I think the LUC version was far superior in that regard.
Yeah, what's genius, that connection between the book, the performance, and the street, and the friendship, and that I think that was a connected state between the Writers Forum, the London Under Construction, and after the after hour. We continue. I don't know, with you, with Sean Bonnie, with Martin, with a lot of people, like continue the poetic state after the book in a way, but from the book and round trip between the both of them, and was really, really amazing. Yeah, sure, we have the energy, Stephen, but we need another meeting for that.
That is true. Actually, there is a second book that we never published. I was looking in my files, and we do have some material that was never actually, we didn't get to do the second text, but maybe that would be an interesting project to resurrect that and think about experimental translation again.
Yeah.
With a whole new set of people nearly 20 years later. Okay, it's 15, 16 years later. Anyway, I'll probably be in touch with people individually if I can find the files for that. So, given that I've been rambling on a little bit, so what I was thinking of doing is showing a few things from the London Under Construction time, if you like, work that came out of that, just to kind of set the scene for the stuff that comes later then. Okay, so I'll share the first bit of the screen. So this is a poem that is in here, actually, is in this book, Reception or Reception. And the reason I want to read this is it connects to another aspect of certainly my poetry that is becoming more important rather than less, which is a connection to gaming, role-playing gaming rather than computer gaming per se, but certainly that's the context of it. So I'll read this one. ElfQuest. Official role-playing in the world of Two Moons is Gather, Wilder, Hunt. Limited random, all fives. A dachshund and a street vendor. What is the difference between these two people? One bawls out his wares on the pavement, and the other, pause for insightful laughs, does the opposite. It's the way I tell him. One. Gather. Yes, Carnal is there with their slanty eyes and pointed ears, their wolverine presence. Two. One, Mythmaker is back, yeah. Three, repeat disco. Four, deeper form, oh yeah. Two, elves don't evolve, ever die, ever. their transcendent physicality, physical transcendence, encompass, yeah, rather than an insipid Celticism. 3. Eye movement, explain that a d6 equals a six-sided die. Roll 3d6, disregard the lowest number rolled, and add 6 to the total of the remaining 2 results. This represents your character's charisma. Quantifying numbers. 4. A game fading cutter. Snarl! Just say it. Snarl. So, and then there's a translation of that, which I might just show you. It's in black and white, but you kind of get the idea. It's in this. I couldn't find the file. Anyway, this was Anna Maria, I think, had done that. That was her translation of that kind of gaming poem. Okay. Around the same time, there is. Oh, now where is this? I see. I have to scroll forward to the document. Give me 1 second to find it. Right. As part of doing the work for this project, the translation project, I had to do some translations of visual material that Gregorio Fontaine had sent me. And I spent months doing this. They were stuck up on my wall, and I was trying to make some sense out of them. And I think I got there in the end. I'm actually really proud of these in terms of translation of visual material into, in some cases, lexical stuff, in others more visual material. So I'll maybe show you a couple of those, maybe rather than necessarily reading them. I think that needs to be rotated, actually. Right, so this is one of the ones that I got from Gregorio, and I had to make something out of it. So in terms of what I made out of it, this is what came. I'm not going to read this one or the next one, but it's just to show you the sort of the process or what came out of this. This is one that I was specifically going to show, which is a really interesting one. I find this really interesting. I don't speak any Spanish, I should say, other than the kind of the odd uno, dos, tres, cuatro sort of type stuff. So not only was there a challenge in terms of translating the visual, there was also a challenge in terms of the words. I didn't bother looking any of them up. I could have done that, but I thought it's more interesting if I just respond to them. So what came out of it was this, which is a poem that has words, but I degraded them and wrote over the top of them and so on. I just liked the shape of them more than the words. So that poem doesn't exist anymore in terms of fragments. It's, although I have a file somewhere with the words, it isn't the poem anymore, so to speak. This is the poem. And to me, this looks like a cat from any direction, from any of the 4 rotations. So yeah, cat ominous line is what that becomes, primarily related to the ominous erasing of the cat in Gregorio's piece. Now, these pieces from Gregorio are from a film. They're stills from film work that he'd done. So again, it was trying to catch something about moving visual material as well, even though they're stills. They're still part of a moving visual thing. There's another one which ended up looking like this, graffiti. And this one is probably to some degree the most important of them. It took me a very long time to make anything of this. Of all of them, this was the one that gave me the least to go on, but it's the one that ended up looking like this. Some of you will have seen me read this, because I've read this quite a few times, but I thought I'd play a recording of this rather than do it now, because again, I don't have the facilities to do this. So I'll stop sharing and play a video if I can. It's about 5 minutes long, 6 minutes long, I think. But we can stop if you get bored, so to speak. Oh, there's something in the chat. What's that? Cancel. Oh, right. Okay. Share screen. Right. So can you see that? I can never be sure with videos.
Yes, yes, yes.
You can. Okay, great. All right. So this is in Prague. I think there was Aidan McCardle was certainly there. I think Jeff, you might have been there as well, were you? I'm not sure. Or were you there the year after? Anyway, oh yeah, Aidan's in the picture. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so I'll play this. If you can't hear it, let me know. Okay. Right, okay. Okay, the first one I'm going to read is English translated into Czech. You see why do it. But it's a translation of this poem by Gregorio Fontaine, who's a Chilean writer, well, a Chilean visual artist and writer. So this is a piece with no title, one which now is my translation of it. Alex Rand is called Name That Barcode. Get in. Thick black, thin white. One mistake. Thick black, thin white. Thick black, thick white, thick black, thick white, and thick black. Empty room. Wandering monster. Not here. Thick black, thin white. Tolkien's boys. Thick black, thin white. Thick white. Alex Rand is called Name That Barcode. Barcode. Okay, who's going to write it? Tolkien's boys. Golden Key 357. Empty room. Wandering monster. Let's try one. Thin black, thick white. Thin black, thick white, thin black. Empty small dogs. 10-foot pole. Tap, tap. Thick black, thin white, thin white, thick white, thick white, thick white, thick white, thin white, thin white, thick white, thick white, thin black, thick white, lost, thick white, thin black, thick black, thin white, thin black, simple key, thick black, thin white, thick black, thick white, thick white, thick white, thick white. Wandering monster. Coming ones or threes. Wandering monster. So I think you've got to get thick white, thick white, thick white, 3 thick whites. Oh. Empty rooms. Thick white and thick black. Our next round is called Name That Barcode. Anyone? Draconic measures. Anyone who regularly Wandering monster. Barcode is an ingenious device for identifying the price of a product. The item is picked up by the cashier. Draconic measures. That's every electronic necessary for hands. Iron calling out. How much is this? Empty small words. The price of the home is magic in 1, 2, 3 minutes. Thick black, thin white, thin black, thick white. Thick black, very high chin black. Thick white, thick black, thin white, thick white here, thick white, and thin black here.
No, I think you've got it. Think white, think white, think white. Oh, think white, think white, think white, think white. Road experiment. In the position. Think white, think lost. Swing, line. Wandering monster. One colour of two in. They come in ones or threes, these. Well, let's try another one. Wandering monster. Thick black, thick white. Thick black, thick white, thick black, thick white, thick white, thick white, and thin black. Thin white and thick black, thin white and thick black, thin white and thick position, thin white and thick black, thick black, thin white, thin black, thick black, thin white, thick black, thick black, thick white, thin black, thick white, thin black, thick white, thin black, thin white and thick black. Okay, let's get an identify that. Color TV. In position. I'm sorry, I haven't a clue.
Okay, so it's relatively clear, I think, what was going on there. Difficult to catch any words. Yeah, that's a fair point, Zoe. From me or on the video, you mean?
Yeah, I was just letting you know because I don't know whether it's what you're hearing, because it sounded like it looked really great, but it sounded like the video might be going through more distortion than you can hear from where you are. That's all. I was just letting you know. Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. To some degree, you can't really hear what I'm saying over the recording anyway. But yeah, that's good. So yeah, what is the gaming connection to that, I suppose? Because gaming is something that pervades a lot of these texts, more than I kind of realized. So this is where that comes from. The first fighting fantasy game book, The Warlock of Firetop Mountain, and that map, if you like, which comes from Gregorio's poem, is to some degree a writing through of the Warlock of Firetop Mountain with various words kind of superimposed on top of it, related to my interpretation of Gregorio's use of space in his piece. Anyway, certainly that's my reasoning for that. So. To jump on a little bit then, we were also talking about translation, and both Felipe and Martin have mentioned translation might be something to talk about, because I've done translation in various different ways, interlingual as well as what I would call experimental translations into and from languages I don't speak. So I thought I'd read two from Greek that come out of the Paros Translation Symposium that I've been to a few times over there with William Rowe and Helen Demos and various other people, where UK and American poets go and spend a week translating poetry from and into Greek and English, with Greek poets there as well. Because I don't speak Greek, so I had to come up with a way to occupy my time and to produce something which had some sort of value. So I'll read two of them. They're relatively short, if I can find them now. Okay, so this is one called Zebra. Eleni Nanapoulou, yes, is the poet, an interesting Greek poet. And this is my reading of her poem using a sort of technique which is to look at the words on the page and run my eye past them very quickly and see what they equate to if they were English. So this is more successful in some than others. This one isn't too bad. And the one I'm going to read next is, I think, even better. Some of the others really didn't work, but I feel these two do. So zebra. Exotica owns zebra, but voracious Tory aping, hate, hate, hate. In writing visage, hate auto-vectoring away. To pause coital situation type, you obviate exotica. Have to quell, have totalitarian efficate passable nation. Advocate me supine extrapolating, us coital sitting, attenuating severe poverty, ovulate antiviral ionapa. Assuage, uvular high and edge, value and atrophy quest traveling, DNA absolute, DNA hoaxing oeuvre emittance, around halal a priori to anti-time, meta-pivotal tapioca scatological, haiku, attenuate, exit sign utopia arrow. So I have no idea what her poem is about. This is what the words looked like to me on the page as I speed read them across. The second one I'll show you because I have a PDF of the original Greek, which won't help you if you don't speak Greek, obviously, but if you do, at least you might have a sense of what I mean by speed reading for visual sense. So this is the poem. Obviously, Opus isn't, or maybe it is then, I can't remember whether it is then or not. But so this is me reading that and translating it visually into what would be an approximate word in English. This is by Harry Nicolaides. Again, my computer didn't have Greek characters at the time. So he actually thought this was an excellent translation of his poem, even though there's no actual knowledge component on my part. So, opus. To use, to devoid, exile over, no, always, pupa, and utopic occupancy in Sophia. Eva tonguing at the arrival, king, excise, anxious, captive. I have real Asia portrayal. Total Ava, wide tongue yapping to notice, allows anywhere to yelp. Kill sophistry, the uptown auspicious. Catapulting opus, auto-native, it avoids to help anxious. Catapulting, first outer wyvern hatcher, this anxious to know, you onyxing haphazardous day yellow. Attenuate our heliport to plot, first tough ovule survival develops. To medieval tempo, oh avaricious advantage, entrepreneur annotated. Two-pronged nova rogues atrophy, exerting opportunities to know to, hatch anything among, to detour noun automatics ballet, have to evacuate opposite, no rappel my suborn. Molotov cocktail Molotov cocktail, Molotov coital apostasy, breveting to militia to avariciously klepto. Allow and have Xena warrior princess, K puberty catalog developing, kill burgeoning, repeal and atrophy. So this is Xena warrior princess, if that makes sense. So, in terms of translation then, there's that sort of stuff as an experimental way of approaching a language I don't speak, but I've also translated from English into English. Some of you will have seen some of this before. I'm not sure some of you will have seen this translation. It's a H.P. Lovecraft translation, which is again connected to gaming in that my entry into H.P. Lovecraft comes through role-playing games, through the game called Cthulhu, which is set in Lovecraft's world, and I then come to the prose after that. Much later, I came to Lovecraft's poetry, which is pretty appalling. There is some good stuff, but not much. So I decided, given the ideas, given how important this stuff is, particularly the mythos stuff, the rest of the poetry is relatively minor, I think it's fair to say, but the mythos stuff tied to his sort of occult mythos, the prose material he's done, I think, is exceptional. So I think the poetry should be redone in a way that does it more justice. So that may be very arrogant of me, but there it is. So I'll show you or read you one of the more recent translations. I've done that. So it's part of a project to translate all of the mythos poetry into what I would call contemporary English. I'll just give you a quick look at it rather than necessarily sharing the screen for that one, for the whole thing. Okay, so it looks something like this. So the Nightmare Lake Dark Carnival edition from the Lovecraft and the Curse of the Chthonians Dark Carnival. So that is actually a role-playing supplement for Call of Cthulhu, which is a scenario, an adventure, if you like, that players play through, called Dark Carnival is one of the adventures. So it's taking a mix of Lovecraft's own language and the Call of Cthulhu gaming supplement that I'm reading Lovecraft through. Oh, sorry. So the Nightmare Lake Dark Carnival edition from the Lovecraft and the Curse of the Chthonians Dark Carnival. It is the roaring 20s, but tumbled down, bloody and raving, stumbled on Hinge's grave in the burying a single bloody shoe, is secretly mad, probably murder by person or persons unknown. Little Freddy Prendergast, with no Freddy visible, the messy incident, him come out, the city dump, I was a peace whimper, just up and swallowed, cautious like that, I seed what I seed, the actual Abner Weems, alas the Applejack, inoperable, the sweater and his tail. With dried mucus, McIntyre's feet were still within his shoes, if a much more fearsome game is required. In his rear pants, Bulldog is personally, he is unmarried, that caused it, a clapboard. A band of Protestant black magic worshippers, amazingly it is just that. Individual, he has had these weird corpses, one of the force. A retired schoolteacher gone wrong in the hobo jungle, he knows nothing that cannot be a mad monk. Stews of dubious fellow pedant put in icy, criminally late books. Leads, if they ask, up such leads, or at play our hearts and hope, fraidy cats and he, such useless stuff, staring over the water, glop in the leaves, clowns and similar adornments. Maze is one, of any real interest, someone who has, it is brass and weighs some 400 pounds, horrors occasionally. Specimen carries a single, is definitely a phony, murder of 5 nuns. He was not a country fool, affair of clapboard, the entire amusement, breeding and bestiality, pickled in a bottle. Be a prime, strange little books, or not, entirely up in a menagerie, lost for this ghoul. A really striking array. Mention the stink, do either vanish, filth and odor, geezer who is not gruesome goings, corner of this keeper, marble mantle, certain sequence of old black, this larval damage done. Special motors, people do the cooking, heavily baffled and more potent switch from inside, one arm torn off till winter or fall, ghouls behind an ambush, only half normal and horrific worm things, him physically them, at that acid leads thought, the viewer ring also renders, ring seep, body quakes, misty times of the serpent people by crawling ritual liquid, continue to rot and flying polyps dig uselessness, whereupon 2 foot black delivered to the ones the hoochie coochie, earthy and ethereal, hollow-bladed under-earth venom, damn accurate, dead or unconscious, heavy makeup and standing, I ain't no bootlicking scrufflaw, capable of bending this is second-eyed Ulster. His thoughts are the animals, resident clown, bite and both, whom he ate. poster out their noisome religion, local colour and canon, promiscuous this, handy with a meat-like devotion, drop the wrong, pearl-handled straight, dying in the manner, and not unattractive, a 9-inch long, somewhat disciplinary. With the unbeliever, Angus is completely nuts, slackwire artist. The three most dangerous arts, using the French, use it in blood, thoughts and unusually amazing India rubber. Forward to his match twice yard-long crow, around and acting, the investigator's avid cannibal, fours than standing, to be a living man under British and bully boy, force and sinister, decay into pick in his coat, stab jutting, certifiably and homicidally insane. That same hatchet, booth and ride, crime about him, ring and maiming, twice normal base, fascination with fungi, to a dead white, add to any san, peer having, be baddies happening there, growing eerie by their human, semi-human worshippers, holes, locks, the public rest, trick pivoting of terror are shunted, victims small car, graves trick hatch, basalt in the swan. Outside are locked. Lair is where ghouls are always, here are promptly eaten. Guns do half, lair is the entry as Chthonan's edge of the hole with 1d8 tentacles. This monster decide the pow of the humans tolerated lush such a zombie would cost. Chthonian and our deformed congenital Sultana can attack to have overcome a fungus himself, consorted into all sorts, heavily made up, scream if they are horrible things, costs a former investigator to gratify some torso that will zombies which are covered vast and deliberately, be sure but the earth's vitals, and gruesome the commands of human forth with horrid, simply asking evil buildings stick to the upper, that such outsiders in no case or go insane, evidence for the watching, occasionally enter the upper, a telepathic message to the fact that this. So that's one of the more recent Lovecraft translations. So I suppose, well, one would say it might help if I was actually read you the original, but I'm not sure it particularly would in this case, in that it reads more through the sense of the poem than the actual language of the poem. Okay, I'll show another quick video. It's about 3 minutes long, where it's from a reading I did at a book launch of 663 Reasons Why. And there are a few other people who kind of come on stage to join me for this one, but I thought it would be, in a way, it kind of brings to an end a series of those readings, reading that piece, a piece called Durée, which involves, well, you'll see what it involves. If I can open it up, where are we? I think that's it. So this is again more of a, oh no, that's the wrong one actually, sorry. I think I have to open it up again. That's what I have to do. So this is kind of going back to performance to some degree, but maybe again related to gaming in a particular way. Okay, maybe I'll turn down the sound a bit here because maybe that was part of the issue, that it was causing some feedback. Yes, through my computer mic, I suppose. I don't know how to make it. Okay, that's a good point. How do I share my computer audio with you?
You have to check in the options and
in the options.
Preferences, sorry. In the audio.
Audio preferences, let's have a look. Audio settings, right. I can't see it. Test speaker output level, test mic. Is it under advanced, maybe?
Another way to try is when you're about to share the video, there's a tiny box at the left that says share computer audio.
Oh.
Maybe if you can try that one.
Okay.
It could work better.
Okay. Is that under advanced? Ah, there it is. Share computer sound. Sorry. Yes. I should know that, given that I use Zoom all the time. Okay. Thank you for pointing that out. Let's try this again then.
Great.
Oh. Insert my password. Okay. What the hell is my password? That work? Is that better? Anyway, you get the idea. There are various other things that we've done that particular reading as well. I kind of put those bits, that series of performances today. Okay, next in terms of translation is the Judge Dredd poems. Judge Dredd, I presume most of you don't. You hopefully be able to see it. He's a kind of an anti-hero set in post-apocalypse USA, cartoon, a cartoon comic character. It's written in the UK, and it's a critique on British Americanization, so to speak. Anyway, he is the law. He's the context. So I have one to read and two to show, so to speak. So the one I'm going to read is very short. It's, I think, the first one I did. Okay. If we say beginnings, it's a weedy dread. If we say beginnings, it's a weedy dread. Funny helmet, safety scot-free, meld-headed, catapulty block, still to come at this point. With the question of frame comes the law the law. Umpty the law was a joke of current policy. Bizarrely dread in the early days had an elderly Italian housekeeper landlady and a speech-impaired mechanical butler / dread servant called Wodger the Wobot, as first impressions go, as vehicles go. A man is a monger cyclopean overlay. The marshal in the moon in volume 1 seems worthy of who we are. Fold the words onto each other. So basically what that is taking volume 1 of the collected case files of Judge Dredd and reading through it. And I wanted to do several things with it, one of which was to try and get to something that engages with the visual component of it. So I'm going to show you what came out of that. So these are, if you like, the remaking of the pages. That's why I can't see it. Okay, view, full screen mode. So there are, I think it's 6 pages or 8 pages, whatever it is, that that volume gets translated into. And it's reusing and damaging the visual material from the graphic novels, the comics themselves. Oh, doesn't seem to want to do that. Why not? That's interesting. Ah, sorry, because I'm at the bottom. That's why. Right, back to the top. Okay, so that's the first one. So they were the stills, if you like, that I put together from the damage I did to the text. But again, although it captures something of the visual movement, it doesn't capture enough. So the next thing was to try the following and produce something which is, I think, more akin to what the visual component of certainly this volume is. So if you kind of scroll it forward, anyway, so that was the first one. So that becomes to some degree, the final translation of that. It really is the 3 together, but this is the one that I think is the most interesting in terms of the.
You're only seeing one image at a time there, Stephen. They're not scrolling. When you start to scroll, you're only seeing the top one.
Ah,
yeah.
That's
so in each case we only saw the first image.
Right. Okay. That's okay. Maybe if I don't make it full screen,
yeah,
that might work a better way. So let's try that again.
Yeah.
So we go back to these ones. So if you let me know then if you can see these.
Yeah, that works better.
Okay, let's try that again. So that's the first one. So these are the stills, if you like. These are the pages individually. This then is the moving version. I'm not sure if this is going to do it now, but we can try it. Did that work that time? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So so that's kind of where I got to with that, and I think that part is the most interesting, and I think part of the way to think about publishing something like this is, well, how do you publish the visual component? I mean, that's completely aside from the question of how litigious Rebellion are about their ownership of Judge Dredd and its imagery. That's a conversation for another day, so to speak. But in terms of publishing these, I kind of see them as moving visual things rather than necessarily book things. But anyway, that's something which I'll kind of think about another time. So this then is Dread 8, which is a longer one. This is to take the 8th volume and do something with that, a similar sort of process, which I won't bother with the other 2 parts. I'll just show you the moving part because it's the written part is quite long. So this is the moving part. Okay, so they're the Dread pieces. I haven't had a chance to get to many more of them, but that's something I'm looking to do more with. So hopefully that'll be a kind of a longer project once I get the time to do it. 2 more things then. How are we doing for time? Okay, we're going slightly over. Next is I should say there is a Judge Dredd role-playing game. I mean, I come through Judge Dredd again through role-playing, which is connected to part of the methodology here in terms of generating a character and so on, which I'll come back to because that'll be what the last thing I do will be related to that. So this one is a remix, if you like, or a reading through a book called Star Bastards, which is like a fighting fantasy novel, except it's a contemporary one. It's 2018 or 17 or something like that, set in space, and you can actually play it as 2 separate characters. The book can be played as depending on how you do it. So that's my little character sheet, which has all my little markings and so on. So I did actually play it. I think I won, but I can't remember. I think I lost once and I won once as one of the characters. So I'm going to read that one. It comes in 2 kind of categories or 2 columns, let's say. So Star Bastards, 2-fisted in space. Start 1. You're playing some cramped descent after a quick swivel. We're good members of the You Are a Radio Beacon repeating up close if you like your chances of this phase out in turn. Start 200. Jump filled into the matter system. This dump of various is a binary murder of your place hard and most leads on the poles, station breaks in sounds assigned to the beat, whatever's to the planet, to the trespassers first and find. 153, a civilization's early, then a few times your little Soyuz advertising parking spaces. Maybe there's something in there they missed. 136, putting the sure enough adverts that jazz gives or the hard way. 183, you guess he's about exposure to space, a double-arsed, illegally massive loser simply jumping, bones back to fleeced in this location. Would you like to go down? 182, the siren you, the docking apparatus, swivel and ion criminal processing, and their ears and cuff them under those cheap space you've never heard of, collars, paperwork, crack. 378, folks don't stand of thousands during the choking pink of places. A space exploration pole is also pretty appealing in the fuel about this place. 275, this tedious form, your tail fail on the riot is spinning up a process if you can pick. 336, for a pilot to grab, chipping at least the pink assorted alien scumbags, the rage on this, hook you up, their prevalence judging. 373, fire your under the station. There aren't even any touchdown gently. 157, those rough at you little creep. You're that space exploration pole. Where we can, obvious rat bags you haven't already done out in. 121, riot in with the burned, lone-faced, laser-scorched. You are still welcome on the pole here, like a good place. 365, gutted and almost entirely for a fuel. Question to be one mounted, the old squad, knocking at high, wrinkled meat tubes for traces of jump back. 395, I'll get right to the glom cops are hot, the action of the route. They'll be jumping the native Matari here. Of your skill set, they gotta kill anyone. Coaster, add the beer and his outraged swearing immediately. 172, monitor mounted your direction, drop anyone and you haven't already done so. The smoke of the main turned to 86 and surly looking wanderings eventually, luminary in the middle, if you know an unprofitable use, if you haven't. 340, ready clutching. Anyone else around? I am head, spacesuit flies of junks holding of this number, quick flick. 390, a little while poking, the people isn't loading with language on the fly, prostule. You seem to have worn your steps if you are interested in trouble. 252, no one shows up, of species and interests, of primitive junk pinched, for places to scent on the pages. You may add 5 to the paragraph until it becomes a break for it already, rock by turning. 86, and surly occupied businesses eventually take the middle and a number for loot. If you know your time, visit the complete then. 356, open for you as you and only place, have a lock on the gambling, home to lick of this planet's revolting, regularly featured, out-bruised and sorry, with these creeps you prefer over at the space. 292, crammed up together of standard size, serviced up in a large black-shelled insecticide, trade anyone needs meat, you could with this place. 116, a hairy miner, away and grudgingly paw and gestures, or piss, pay this creature money, pole is or I don't know nothing on your threat. 86, for a wander and surely all over the mostly choked luminary in the middle, if you'd like use of your time, then there's nothing for turning to. 237, over a cheap and down at a space goons, undermined somewhat, you've seen him chasing your tail, just bust up of its income, just beat the information. 282, great some of the pink buckling in with your business for a long comes along it's still otherwise. 61, just as dusty terminates from a partially dozen circus, nor scent of the just roaming or the fuel by turning. 318, sitting in your tin, rusty old light speed for a lift turn, sitting your luck, you're like the old turn to. 358, bunker and stand a bone in here, his eye of evidence and evidence, return to this read on barking than my bark skulking up your threat. 382, a huge alien, always impressed, labor and no too long and bristling, your small ship instantly in your ears along a move on and clamp permission go and wait. 257 around with you, boiled lines can be winners, notice his fingers, whine of an energy high sign to, one chance at the floors, walls and tables, here but a bartender's. 249, spinning up the Soyuz, speed and from precisely, maybe up and you your spaceship if you fail. 251, the deck just slugger right, the vacant is instantly lethal and jam the I'll talk. So that is playing, there's 2 columns, one is playing the curiously named 10-foot pole, who is the 10-foot Polish astronaut, which is a gaming joke. If you know you're gaming, you know a 10-foot pole is something that you you tap out in Dungeons and Dragons to trigger the traps before they get you. And the other one is he's a dog. He's a dog detective. So anyway, you probably heard some dog stuff coming through that. So I was going to do, but I think we've run out of time really. I was going to do a little kind of reading through of a character creation of a bunny. But I'll just give you the headings I was going to do. So creating your bunny, choose the profession, what can a bunny do, basic rabbit to rabbit combat, and the spirit of herbs. So maybe that's fun for me to write and perform at another time. But what's most interesting about this for me is that this book is how many hundreds of pages long? 220 pages long, and at least 3/4 of it, or well, yeah, 2/3 of it, let's say, maybe slightly more than or slightly under 2/3, is made up of an appendix about herbs. Herbs are the magic system of bunnies and birds. So it's several hundred pages of detailed descriptions of herbs, which I think is fantastic. Bonkers and crazy, but so I think that's something for me to work with in terms of a methodology for that. Okay, so I think that's me done for the moment. Sorry to have gone on.
No, thank you very much, Stephen. It was great to see all this huge array of things you're experimenting. I had a little question. Because lots of the elements of your poetic world are, as you said, are related to games and role-playing books, which, by the way, when I was a teenager, I spent lots of time reading and playing with those. I played the Lone Wolf series, which was amazing. I really love it. And
wow, great.
Yeah. And at that time it was very hard to get the books from the States, so it was like a whole aventure just to get the books. But I wanted to ask you, obviously lots of that material comes from novels, from narrative books. So how is that process of getting those elements in a more poetic form? Is there any specific change, or because I was trying to think about it, there's not too much like science fiction poetry, I mean contemporary poetry or adventure poetry. If you read all the medieval novels, they were written in verse, by the way, but or lots of them, but in contemporary poetry, those themes and those characters and those elements are not so common. So how do you see your place around that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I've just added you now to my list of potential readers now, because really when it comes to this stuff, it's Joe Lindsay, Richard Parker, Francis Jean Rowe, and that's about it.
Yeah,
that's my demographic.
Yeah, no Richard loves.
Now I can add you to that. Yeah, as these kind of dorky, gamey people.
Yeah.
So yes, it is true. There isn't much of it out there. Although Richard, Francis, and myself, we did a conference last year on science fiction.
Yeah,
poetry, science, and science fiction, and we have an anthology which is. It's being put together in terms of some of the papers or responses to the papers and some poetry related to that, and that will be coming out. Well, we said December, but it might trip over into a little bit later. I see Richard holding his hands up like that. So yeah, so if actually, I'll put a call out there for those of you who do write science fiction, poetry. Send me an email because we haven't actually gone to press yet, so there may be room to put in some.
Oh, I haven't written, but I wrote a poetry book about James Bond. It's the farthest I've gone. Yeah.
Fantastic. But yeah, anyway, so in terms of what this is, to some degree, as you say, there isn't much of an interest, or maybe not an interest is the wrong word. Maybe there's not much of a selection of speculative as in speculative fiction poetry out there, and quite a lot of my stuff fits into that to some degree. I mean, it's very fragmentary. And my interest in, or my development, if you like, into innovative poetry really comes through reading game books, where my initial encounter with a book like this was when I was, whatever, 14, 13, no, it might be 12 actually. I read it I just read it in the order that it came, which isn't the way you're supposed to do these at all. And I couldn't figure out why it didn't make sense. But I doggedly kept reading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And of course, you have options to move forward, and you navigate your way backwards and forwards through the books to form a narrative. So in a way, when I kind of first encountered more innovative poetry work through meeting William Rowe and Aidan McArdle and Piers Ugal in Birkbeck at the time, it made sense to me, because I was used to thinking about language which was broken up or narratives that were broken up and didn't make sense in a way.
I remember, for example, when I first read Julio Cortázar and Hopscotch, or later like B.S. Johnson or other writers that play with the order of the book, in a way it's very similar to this book. So it's great to make this link, because they're usually in different shelves, like teenage novels and serious novels. So it's good to link them, I think.
Yeah, and I think gaming methodology is really interesting, to me anyway, in terms of how the mechanics of games work and how the mechanics of reading work, and how those come together in forms of thinking about game studies as distinct from game theory. Game theory is mathematical, it's kind of maths field, but game studies is a kind of interdisciplinary field that looks at gaming from multiple different angles. And it again feels to me very fragmentary, and the sort of stuff that I do is very fragmentary. And again, I find myself thinking about fragments that are there and fragments that aren't, and how they make up the text. So to some degree, that's where my interest in them comes.
Great.
It's interesting. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, I was just following on from that. I mean, I was just wondering how that also connected with spaces, because when you were talking about London under construction, I was remembering hearing about that at the time, and I was far away. I was in Wales. I didn't get to see anything that you did, but I was thinking. I mean, it was actually early 2000s. Like some of those sort of situationist texts were coming into English at that point. And so I remember, the translation of a lot of situationist work was 1998, leaving the 20th century. And I was wondering how that gaming sort of situation that you were describing and the situatedness of a text, is that also influenced by your sort of exploration of situations in the city? And do you see those things as linked, the gaming and the city?
Sure, yeah. I don't know whether we want to call it a devolution of space or of place even, and how we choose to navigate them rather than how we necessarily do navigate them was certainly very interesting to me. And with the London under construction thing, we did kind of go and maybe dissemble in terms of dissembling as a form of speaking. We did dissemble spaces in what were at times very interesting ways, and at other times they just spilled out all over the place, and they to some degree didn't end up much of a space in that sense. But in terms of thinking through spaces, definitely that those gaming mechanics and those notions of being able to map things in ways that are translatable, I found quite empowering in a way. There was an example of something I was going to give there that's just gone straight out of my head. I can't think. Sorry.
Did you feel in that? Were you responding to situationism? Were you thinking about that, or was it Did it just sort of happen? Was it filtered through that moment in poetry?
Yeah, I think, yeah, at the time I wasn't particularly aware of the Situationists at all. And I mean, that may well have been part of it for other members of LUC, because as I said, we came at it from our own spaces, all of us. And it was like a series of knives thrown in a particular direction, and where the angles at which they entered the dartboard or the wall or whatever, or the floor, was kind of where it then all formed a pattern, if you like. And those patterns are what I found most interesting, the way they recreated spaces in ways that were different but pointing in the same direction, or at least the frame that we put on those takes suggested that they pointed in the same direction, even if they didn't, if that makes any sense. So for me, no, not at the time, but it may have filtered in through the other people's reaction to that, so to speak.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks.
So I think I cut across Chris, I think. So.
Yeah, Stephen, thanks. I'm interested in the kind of the common thread, in a sense, that there is between those game kind of interrogations of yours and the stuff like the London Underground thing. I mean, in a sense, they're both bureaucracies. I mean, a game becomes a kind of bureaucracy. It becomes a kind of institution, as London Underground does. And it's a space too, right? And so for me, what's interesting is that kind of almost like crossover in how your language adapts to it. Is that something that's in your mind, or? Sure.
I mean, in terms of space, absolutely. And it's not just a generated space. It's usually a shared space of one kind or another. So role-playing games are stories written or told by multiple people at the same time. For those of you who haven't played a role-playing game before, Dungeons and Dragons is the famous one, where there is one, maybe master narrator is not the right term. There's a director, which is possibly the term that's used, I think, in some role-playing games, games master, dungeon master, keeper, whatever it would be. But I like the idea of a director who then co-creates a story or an adventure, which is often far more non-linear than one would expect from a group of kind of fantasy or science fiction-y game players who generate a whole series of altered spaces and remake the spaces by pulling in stuff that's going on in the current real space and real time around them into what is a manufactured shared game space. And I find that kind of three-dimensionality really interesting in terms of spaces. So there's that aspect, I suppose, in terms of shared spaces. What was the question?
Yeah, fascinating. And also just getting back to this whole, I don't know if people heard it tonight before I came in or if you read any of it, but this huge interrogation that Stephen did with London Underground, which in a sense is a shared space. You could say it's a kind of daily, hourly, by the minute. I would say role playing. It's like real playing reality. And you're interrogating these set of responses that you get, which are almost, you could say, are the after the fact rules of the game or something. So to me, that's like a very fascinating kind of thing that you're, in a sense, in both cases, you're dealing with a social, bureaucratic, institutional structure that allows some freedom.
Yeah, actually, that's very astute. Yes, definitely, because a book like this is just a rule book in effect. And what you do is you generate not just a space, but you generate character and you generate language through it. And you choose whether or not to obey the rules. I've been reading up on the history of role-playing. These books, there's a series of these books called Designers and Dragons, which go through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 00s, talking about the gaming industry and what happened and where it started and so on. And there's a curious thing, which I knew about, but it was interesting to see it recorded in this sort of historical manner, where the biggest game company of the day, the one that started it all off, was TSR, Tactical Studies Research or Rules. God, I can't remember now. Anyway, TSR were the people who invented role-playing games. They published Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons at the beginning was extremely free-form. The rules were given as mainly just a suggestion to gamers who knew what they were doing. This was just a way to make the mechanics work in particular ways, because it came out of wargaming, a little miniature wargaming as its basis. So it is very free-form. What happened then in the kind of mid to late 70s was that they began to develop advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which tried to codify everything into a series of rules that players were supposed to stick to and weren't supposed to be generating their own versions of the rules, which is an interesting development very soon. It's only 4 or 5 years into the hobby, so to speak. And there has been a kind of consistent, let's say, discussion about to what degrees the rule systems are malleable or are respondable to in certain ways. So definitely the 663 Reasons Why, I just played a little bit of the, not of that, but of the introductory piece that's in that book, the Duré piece. But yes, in terms of engaging with bureaucracy and structures, definitely gaming then to me is a way to look at these sort of things where you see them as ways to generate responses that hopefully undercut or reimagine the notion of not just bureaucratic, but also official response. And one of the things I found interesting about that was my responses, my crazy letters complaining to London Underground or Transport for London were becoming more and more high-pitched as their responses became more and more high-pitched to me. So what fell out of the collision of those two languages and the splintering of it was, to me, the most interesting thing that came out of that. And again, to me, that's connected to these notions of shared language spaces that we share either in gaming or in our interfaces with these sort of organizations that we have little or no control over, if that makes any sense. I'm rambling a bit now.
Yeah.
Right, thanks.
Yeah, and that kind of translation that time we make, I remember that night with you, Sean Bonnie, Luna, Adrian, Martin Gavins, Jeff, I think were like trying to cleaning we talked about it the other night, the grave of searching for William Blake.
Mm-hmm.
And the caps appears after, and we start to read, that kind of monument, like vertical monument in the front of the cemetery, and after Andres remember better than me that kind of history. I think he was there. Do you remember, Andres, that better than me that moment or not? But I love that moment in London under construction, because it was a kind of glissando between reality and book and poetry and performance, and you never know when go inside of the meeting or outside in a way, like the space was like constructing us under another, and we finish in big joy. I said that is, for me, it's like a wonderful remembrance of those moments, that kind of joyful connection between reality and poetry, and a social space reality, and when the poet make an intervention in a group, in a community. That's now with COVID rules, it seems like all times,
Absolutely, yeah. That was one of the things about that made it most interesting. Was it was a community of a sort that really had very little direction to it in a way. We were very happy not to pin down what we were doing, or to we did talk about it in advance. We even did rehearsals a few times, as I remember. They were incredibly chaotic, but that was great. And we did several performances where we just responded to the space we were in. One in the Clinker, which I think Aidan mentioned, and I think someone else mentioned last week as well. Apparently Piers Hugill has that on, he has a recording of it somewhere. So the big question will be can we get it from him? But that was responding to the musicians who were playing. There was other people playing before us and after us, and we just went on and, responded to that. And that felt really, maybe innocently, it felt like a shared space that we weren't necessarily recreating, but we were part of, with this, what's the kind of improvisational music that was going on at the time.
Any question around, friends?
Can I ask something about the Judge Dredd pieces that you showed? I mean, those kind of deconstructions of those. It's not a cartoon, is it? Comic book pages. I mean, that some of those looked very much like some of the stuff that Bob Cobbing was doing with a photocopier, pulling them through and creating kind of movement of kind of static pages. I mean, but obviously differed from the first set that you showed, where you seem to kind of try to reconfigure the space of, again, thinking about space, the space of a typical kind of comic book page with its guttering, and what do you can say about the two different kinds of processes that you went through with that work?
Yeah, actually, you're absolutely spot on. It was fiddling around with a photocopier. It was very much the Bob Cobbing thing. Putting them through putting the pages that I'd identified, I wanted this image to be, or the particular words to try and come out in some way. I did multiple versions of it and found the ones that I wanted, and then I put them together in what looks like a traditional comic book page. But if you look at them, it's all those distorted images are in there anyway. And it starts then to play with and I mean, this is only the first one. The idea would be, as I develop them, that space of the comic book page, this stuff, I'll show you what I mean. If I have it. Yeah, okay, if I share this. So this stuff is, it looks more comic booky than it actually is in a way, because this image here is a mutated, twisted version of the image on the page, as is that one. So again, I'm trying to get something about movement here and about shape and so on, but it does look like a traditional comic book page, and that to some degree does as well. In fact, all of these first ones, begins to kind of fall apart a little bit here. But they are relatively traditional as graphic novel or comic book pages in that sense. This is only the first one. What I do with the second, third, fourth, fifth, I mean, there's 33 volumes of this now. I'm not sure I'll end up doing 33 versions of these, but where I go with the page it's a really good question. I don't know where I go with the page. I found the moving part, the moving visuals, which is just simply that old technique of flipbook thing. Basically, you're just running them past the screen like an old film in that sense. That seems to capture something about the movement, which isn't really about continuity. It's about that kind of vectoring that Stan Brakhage is so interested in his work, that kind of moving off the screen and the moving out of focus rather than into focus. So yeah, in terms of the techniques, I suppose the second one is more about spilling over the edges of that page. What I want to try and find a way to do is to make that work in kind of static pages as well. So in terms of the project, that's going to be a bit of a tricky one, how to do that and not just get dull after a certain amount of time. But also not to have it completely overshadowed by the moving parts, which are the parts that I find most compelling for me anyway. And it may well be that just one or two of them ends up being moving and the rest then adopts some other form, because they begin to approximate each other relatively quickly, I've found, in the experiments I've done with it. If that makes any sense. But no, you're absolutely right. It is playing with a photocopier and really enjoying playing with a photocopier, actually. I'm not sure the University of Surrey would necessarily agree that that is a valid use of their resources, but I think it is.
Yeah.
I have another question, which I always want to ask every week, but not always I I made it, but I think I have done it a couple of times, because we're always talking between people that are naturally interested in this kind of stuff. But how has been the reception in other poetic circles or other groups in which you have participated? Have they been interested more in your performances, your books, or some part of your work or another, or they just say it's not poetry or whatever?
Oh yeah, I get plenty of that's not poetry.
Yeah, I suppose.
Funny, Barbara Hardy, who is a professor in Birkbeck and a kind of very well-known poet, she was always lamenting that that I went down this path and had ignored my, quote, beautiful lyrical voice, because it's my kind of old, it's quite lyrical and it's quite, yeah, it doesn't do, but you know, she was very supportive in her own way for somebody who had little or no interest in that type of work. I mean, obviously, most of my students have no idea what I'm doing or why, and that's fine. Most of us who are teaching have that experience with most of our students. But yeah, I mean, certainly people in working who I've worked with in partnership, so composers or filmmakers, whatever it would be, or performers, they seem far more ready to take this stuff and run with it than certainly most traditional poetry people. Some of them kind of look at it blankly, but you know, plenty of poetry people will acknowledge that there's something there that they're not interested in, which is fine, I suppose. And to some degree, that's all you can ask for. But yeah, I mean, it's not something I particularly think about, to be honest. I mean, if I wanted to write lyrical poetry, I could write lyrical poetry, and I could do it relatively well, but it's just not interesting. So it's not something that comes into the discussion. Whether, of course, the institution that employs me will continue to value the sort of stuff I do is another matter. But currently, they certainly do. And that's, I think, those of us who work in institutions where our research is part of what we do, we're very lucky, I suppose, that they give us the space to do that. So, yeah, I mean, there's lots of people here that I know who are in similar scenarios. And I think certainly in my institution, they're, for a quite traditional organization, they are surprisingly willing to let us go about our odd and strange, postmodern, as they see it, things without interfering too much in it. And, you know, that I'm very grateful for, I have to say. And academic colleagues are usually very supportive of that. Though I did have a really interesting experience in Birkbeck, this one I was a student there, going to the poetry workshop led by Barbara Hardy, but who it also had some really interesting innovative people in there. Val Pancucci, it was one of the first books we published for Revere, actually, was through Val Pancucci, who was a poet who used to be part of the sort of early London kind of writers forum-y sort of field. But then she kind of went off and did her own thing for years and didn't really publish anything. So, but she used to go there, and Diana Godden and kind of several other people who were Richenda Power, interesting people. Anyway, but I read some sort of found piece, taking found material from eBay, and one of the professors, Birkbeck professor of, I don't know what she was, children's literature or something got to do with children anyway, but she was absolutely indignant that I had stolen this work and had passed it off as my own, and how dare I do this? And I said, wow, you're a professor, but B, you work in 20th century literature or whatever. I think, you know, has the whole of modernism, late modernism, whatever we want to call it, has it passed you by to such a degree that even a little piece of found material is so offensive to you, and not just because of what it was, but the fact that I had reused it from somebody else and presented it as my own. So that was an interesting experience, to be denounced in such a manner, but you know, fine. It doesn't really bother me in that sense. Yeah, I can't imagine it does for anybody else here either.
Yeah, I think something that is funny with the institutions, at least here in Chile, I think they really don't matter what are you researching on. The only thing it matters if you publish or get the funding. So if you get the funding for whatever you do, it's fine. They just want to put a check in the list and they are okay. Maybe they are not interested, but you know, it's interesting that that sometimes we can get funding or get our articles published about this kind of poetry, because sometimes it's useful to make it look serious in a way for people that just say it doesn't poetry, and at least I think that occupy some of those spaces can make some of them at least think. In Chile, at least, it was what happened with lots of us. I mean, I publish articles about Andres or Carlos or Martin Gavins in very serious journals. So I don't know, someone can get interested in that way. By the way, congratulations to Andres, which he's now our laureate poet. Today
Wow.
he's the most official of all Chilean poetry. He's institutional.
Wow.
So
Congratulations. Hey.
yeah. He just got a very important prize here in Chile. So you see, we are occupying those spaces.
Yeah,
Andreas, read us a poem, man.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
From the collection.
Take it.
Doesn't matter if it's only Spanish, that's fine.
But later on, it's still Stephen's session.
No. Go ahead. I would like to hear one.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you a question about Judge Dredd.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
It's maybe a trivial thing, and I missed the first part. Maybe you already mentioned, but I don't know anything about Judge Dredd apart from a song by a speed metal band called
Anthrax. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know that.
I Am the Law.
Ah,
It's a good
Yeah,
one.
so they used to have it was a big single for them, and I Am the Law, and there was a whole sort of Judge Dredd imagery around in the records and so on. But I wonder if there was a connection to metal.
Not really. Well, I mean, I say not really, but again, I came up in the role-playing game industry, not the industry as such, within the field, let's say, and that was full of metalheads and goths, and you know. But certainly, I do remember getting a single called "Blood for the Blood God," which came in free with the issue of White Dwarf, which is a gaming magazine of the time, which was a heavy metal and really heavy metal thing. So a lot of people still now are that's part of the culture of gaming. It's never been particularly my part. I was more sort of a Kate Bush sort of person, which, to be honest, is equally popular with all the heavy metal people, actually, strangely, the ones that I know anyway. But certainly that the imagery certainly is, and all that sort of stuff. I mean, Judge Dredd, as I say, it's a British comic which imagines Mega City 1, which is New York, or the whole of the eastern seaboard of the US as having gone through a crisis of a judicial crisis where the justice system is broken down, and they have a massive population, the vast majority of whom are unemployed and predisposed towards crime. And then we have these law figures who basically have become judge, jury, and executioner all in one. So it's really about the how that societal disruption or decay becomes used for a sort of totalitarian exposition, if you could call it that. But what it also is, as I say, a critique of the increasing Americanization of British culture, going back to the 80s. I forget when the first one was. I think it was early 80s. So it's, I mean, there's Britsit, which is the southern part of Britain, which is all that's left after the nuclear holocaust. And Ireland, amusingly, is called the Emerald Isle Theme Park. So it's in effect a theme park where people go to visit and visit people with shillelaghs and leprechauns and things like that. So it's a very sort of British, darkly comedic take on a sort of a creeping Americanism. Now that sounds really anti-American, not anti-American at all. But at the same time, you look at what is happening there now, and there are some rather alarming parallels in terms of the abuse of the legal system and what led to the story that leads up to the establishment of the judges and how they have absolute power and blah 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 blah. Anyway, yeah. I'm not sure that answered the question at all, but
interesting.
But also, we did this collaboration on the Judge Dredd piece that you read the game, but that you made all the sounds of the computer. And
yeah. Actually, I don't have that recording. I wish I did have it.
I have the text if you want to screen share that.
Yeah.
Can I share screen?
I would have thought so. Yeah. Do you need permission from?
No, maybe. Let's try.
I think I can, yes.
Stephen, you can do the sounds over the text.
So this was for the original Lost Up, an anthology. I think this is the piece that I wrote, and then this is your dub, and that's the one you performed, the dubbed version of it.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and that was really fun, actually. Yeah, we did a kind of a performance on stage where we both we read each of our we read the two.
We read at the same time.
Yeah. So yeah, it's good. I'd forgotten about that, actually. Yeah.
And then that was your piece.
Yeah.
And that was how I dubbed it.
That was your dub of it. Yeah. That was a really interesting project, that one.
But then this was the one that we read.
So yeah, which became a sort of sound piece and a visual piece, as well as reading through the kind of lexical component. And again, it was feeding your text through a sort of visual filter. I think I did some of the technique that what's his name, Kenneth Goldsmith talks about in his Uncreative Writing, where you take a picture and you interfere with the code. There's a little bit of that, some of that stuff up at the top and in the middle, where it blanks out part of the image because you've put, what I think I did was I fed part of your coding back into the image underlying the code, Ghazal, which is how it produced some of those effects. And other things are then just superimposed on top.
Yeah, and I think that is nice in an experimental way that we tried all of those years in poetry, that we're not like under the power of literature, alone. You have like it's more connected to other arts and philosophy and action and things. It's not under the power of literature. We are not like literary poets in a way. Same if we are in literature also. But we are go beyond the letters in a way. And how do you feel that? Because you talk at the beginning about that resurrection of reception. With all the trace of
I'll just have a look and see what there is of that. Where are we?
The resurrection of reception.
Where is it? Reception 2. Well, I only have one file, which is Stefano Mazzari, translated by Justin Katko.
Oh.
Right.
And it's in Italian, strangely. Oh no, sorry, that's the Italian, and this is the English. Okay, this is the only one I have then. We'll have to kind of see, can we dig out, actually there's multiple short poems translated into Justin Katko-esque. I'll share one of them actually, because it's amazing. Justin Katko is somebody we should definitely see more of.
Oh yeah, the Pringle would be cool.
Yeah. So this is, as far as I can see, a translation of this. Again, I don't speak any Italian, so I won't even attempt to read that.
Dolce stilo nuovo.
Anyway, so this is Justin's version. Eat a Chi-Chi's revenge style as I ram a pungent Christian, those immiserable days of dry pogrom. I'm not going to try and do it as Justin. He's too inimitable in that sense. She cried sullen and shaken in lute song each year that layered fat contaminants. I wrote these appendices for the resistance anchored in lucid sense. Flat idiomatic choice, heart beefeaters, cringe stylus ramming a punted slice, losing consumable ways to depogrom. She scried sullen shock in lute song each beer played, that he fan base I smote, these stupidophytes for the resistance tankard in mutoid gents, and so on. Anyway, really, really interesting stuff. But I thought I had more than that. Maybe I do have it somewhere, but that seems to be the only thing that's in my reception 2 file, actually, which is a bit disappointing. But again, maybe that could be something that we could think about doing. Maybe do it through this, in terms of the people who are reading at the Languages of Iris grouping, should we say.
Anyway. Stephen,
Yeah.
I had a quick question. Often in some of your other work, you have read disparate characters through the language of other texts. So I think it was one of the popes through our currently getting rid of President of America, although he wasn't anything close to it in those days, and Star Wars. With the Judge Dredd ones, you've taken the visual, and maybe you've done more with the language and I haven't seen it, but you know, there's a particularly directed kind of language, directed kind of as in who can be right, who can be wrong, and how these things are answered. I just wondered, were you tempted to read anything else through the Judge Dredd language or through that?
Yeah, I didn't read because it's quite long, is the text, the lexical version or the lexical reading of the longer one, the Judge Dredd 8, in effect, and that's 2 pages of quite dense stuff, and it does pick certain words out of it one by one, and put them together in ways that hopefully bring out that imperialism of language in a way that is there in relation to the law, in relation to direction, and the control of resistance and so on. So yeah, but again, I've only done 2 or 3 of them at this point, so that will be part of what comes next. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that that not just America recently, but quite a lot of places at the moment, and I'm thinking of what's going to happen as we move into the next year, and you find situations around these vaccines and stuff. It seems so. It's just like something out of a Judge Dredd story, as to how the populace will respond, or will be told to respond, will be allowed to respond, and it just seemed to me that I could see parallels between. I could, how you read, say, one character through a different set of texts, and how it shows up certain aspects of their character that they try to hide in reality, I was just seeing parallels with this Judge Dredd text, and then the distortion of the pictures as well. About the idea that so much is distorted. It's nearly impossible to understand that what we're seeing is truth or fact or reality. And just to say, just as a last thing, I when I was looking at your texts, all I could think of was more like club music, but really, really extreme kind of club music. But I can see where the Anthrax might come into that. You can do a remix.
Sure.
Thanks, Stephen.
Club music is there. Dance music underpins most of my work in some way or another. It's dancing and gaming really seem to be 2 of the motifs that creep in all the time. But yeah, so yeah, why not some heavy metal as well? Yeah.
Stephen, I just want to add something that your Judge Dredd piece reminded me in a way to a poem by Christian Bach, where I think it's available at Pen Sound, where he kind of like try to do the same what you're doing with images and movement, but with he's just taking part of the phonetically, those expressions that on comic books kind of like indicates like a blow or like a zoom, wind,
pop,
boom,
yeah.
and he kind of like make a poem with all those sounds and try to I don't know, I see something there, although it's really interesting the connection you're making with Judge Dredd and now the present where the police is being like judge and executioner at the same time, which is kind of creepy in a way. Also wanted to mention that Roberto Bolaño was also, obsessed with board games. And I think he had an addiction. He used to play those things like hours and hours, and also play those by mail. I don't know how that works, but he
I used
managed
to do that as well.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. This was back when I was in college the first time. What you did was you wrote down. Well, they sent you. The games master sent you. This is what is happening, and then you had to describe what your character was doing, based on a series of events that would happen. You would send it in. Everybody would send in their actions, and what would happen in the game world depended on what people were not emailing, were posting in. Then you would get back these typewritten kind of 2 to 3 pages of what had happened as a result of your actions as you interfaced with what the other people were doing, even though you couldn't see what they were doing. It's a bit like there's a form of wargaming, board gaming / wargaming, where I forget what the term for it is now, but it's where as a player you can only see your part of the board. You can't see the opponent's part of the board, so you can't see what you're doing, even though it's the same picture, it's the same board, if you see what I mean. It's an interesting equivalent.
It's like a naval battle, right? Where you have the board and you kind of call your bombing ships from the opponent.
Sure, yeah, it's absolutely battleship. It's a more complex
battleship. That's the thing, yeah.
Yeah, it's a more complex version of that, but yes, it's the same idea. But yes, this was basically sending your moves in by post, waiting 2 weeks or whatever it was to get your response back, and it was called Play by Mail. It was a crazy idea when I think about it. If you think about it now, where people are playing online,
Right.
Virtual games instantaneously together in the same virtual space. This was a kind of an analog version of that in a way. And yeah, so yeah, I've been there. I am one of those geeky people who tried that as well. Actually, I know what I was going to say earlier, that in response to something that Zoe had said, talking about space, which was another form of gaming called live action role play, or LARP, which is where there's multiple different versions, but the most famous is where you dress up as a warrior and have a rubber sword, and kind of, you smack each other over the head and you have battles and so on. That's the kind of the kind of the gonzo version of that, if you like, the kind of comedy version. There are quite serious LARP gaming forms which are about the sorts of responses we have to certain actions and so on, and how we respond in groups and blah, blah, blah. But again, it's about a certain type of shared space, which is generated through the interface of sometimes very free form or non-existent rules, with the sort of agency of the reader, if you like, or the actor within a text, because these are seen as texts rather than necessarily actorly spaces. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, that's a slight aside there. But that's really interesting. What is his name? Maybe if you can type it in the...
It's Roberto Bolaño, and the novel, it's called The Third Reich.
The Third Reich, as in...
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay, I'll look that up.
And also wanted to ask you if you're familiar with the work of Aaron Winslow. It's another... he's based in Brooklyn, and he's a sci-fi writer. Oh. He's really interesting. He's post-apocalyptic, but very, very funny and weird. So you might find him interesting. I think you can find interviews or some fragments of his work at Jacket 2.
Oh, okay. What's his name again? Let me write it down.
Aaron Winslow.
Okay. I'll definitely check it out.
And the last thing, I don't know if you guys knew about this thing, but there's kind of a situationist app that you can download on your phone, and it will give you instructions and, I don't know, like prompt you to do certain things. So if you are into that kind of things, okay, you can download that app too.
Uh-huh. That sounds a bit like didn't the Catholic Church have a confession app at some point, where you could get your sins absolved on the phone remotely, so to speak. Which is a bizarre idea, but why not? It's no more bizarre than the original. So yeah.
Trisha Lowe has a poem about confession, which is kind of edgy and really interesting. And speaking of all this bunch of like American post-conceptual poets.
Yeah, but the confession, I think it's only strange for, I don't know, for Christians, because in Asia there are a lot of machines that help you, I don't know, pray and stuff, like since I don't know the prayer, I don't know, the flags and all this stuff. So they pray, and they have machines that pray for you. So it's only strange for us, I guess.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, I like that idea that machines can stand in for us and do that's a very kind of...
Yes, they even have robots that pray, and Buddhist robots and stuff. So that's, for them, it's not strange, I guess.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea. I like that.
There's a Celan toilet in China, apparently.
Oh, really?
Paul Celan Loo lavatory, public lavatory.
I think that was a misprint for clean, wasn't it? Clean toilet. They misprinted it as Celan toilet.
I like the idea of a sort of cubist toilet. I think that's something quite nice.
Have you ever, Stephen, you remember Second Life? It's kind of a game, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, did you ever check that out? Because that's got a lot of weird possibilities to it. I mean, I didn't go into it myself, but.
Yeah, no, actually, computer games haven't really interested me that much. I mean, I have a few of the very old ones, and I have a few of the game book ones, the game book and role-playing adaptations. But in terms of that, that side of gaming, I'm actually not that well up on, really. It's I always found them very limiting, whereas role-playing games as the kind of tabletop version are to a large degree very delimited, even with the rule systems they have, the kind of 200 page, 300, 400 pages in some cases rule books. They're very free form. So yeah, but I mean, in terms of what certainly computer games offer, I mean, I'm sure you've all come across the old kind of Zork ones, which is like a game book where you type in, you know, you get a line of text. Do you want to turn right or left? You just type in or L. Those are quite basic, but I think as you get into kind of shared space, kind of massively online multiplayer or massively multiplayer online role-playing games, like World of Warcraft or so on, where you can to some degree reprogram the space around you to do various different things. It potentially gives you a lot of material that you could make poetry out of very easily, because of and I'm not necessarily just talking about the things that happen in it. I'm talking about the gaming structures that allow you to do certain things and to move and behave in certain ways, which then begin to generate certain types of language, which, anyway, it depends whether you're interested in that or not. But I'm more interested in the gaming structures of those sort of games than the actual gameplay itself. Although the gameplay is a form of structure in that regard. But yeah, I'm less interested in the adventuring and more interested in the mechanics in that regard, I would say, which makes me a little bit more geeky than, you know, your average game player, I suppose.
Have you ever tried to play Nomic?
No, what's that?
Well, Nomic is a game was invented by, I think it was I don't know, law professor or something, and he invented a game. I think it's a set of 10 rules or something, and those rules are basically about how to change the rules.
Oh.
And you just play it like, I don't know, a couple of people, and you change the rules, and that's the game. It's really great. Like, yeah.
How do you spell that?
Nomic. I can type it in the chat. It's
GNOMIC, I suppose.
Yes.
Ah, okay, good.
Oh, wait, what's the wrong? Sorry, wrong chat. Sorry, here. Here.
Ah, perfect. Okay, I'll look that up. I'm actually teaching a new class in January, which is on writing for gaming. Some of it is computer gaming stuff, which I don't have much experience of, so it's going to be a bit of a massive learning curve for me. But okay, Peter Suber.
Yes, that's the guy. Yeah, because we made a computer game, like a kind of online game, some years ago, maybe 10 years ago, and unfortunately it was only a prototype. It was about changing the rules in a kind of democracy-like setting. It was really great because you could, I don't know, change from a democracy to a dictatorship and back and stuff. So
that sounds really fun.
Yeah, it's really fun because you could, I don't know, you can just decide that somebody is king, and then you have to follow the rules, and it's really great. Like, you can play a whole evening just by talking.
Yeah,
it's really good.
You have to create a game for us, guys.
This is a game.
This is a game of its
or ungame. Is this ungame or game?
What's the difference?
Same player shoots again. It's a wonderful movie of Wenders, or a short metrage about that repetition of things. But I feel that connection of your work, Stephen. Each time that I see you, another time I can connect more of your different parts, and that connection between games and publication and actions and translation, experimental translation, like the first book, like how you feel that with those new kind of connection between us now. how you can make a game with us with those elements.
It's a good question. I mean, I know so many game mechanics in my head now that they begin to bleed into the way I see the world going on in a way. So I'm not sure. I mean, you mean right now? I mean, we could do a sort of Dixit type thing where you describe something in language which doesn't give it away, but gives your players enough of a response. So maybe we could do a little bit of birds and bunnies. Then we could maybe do that and respond maybe to if I put something out there. So, for example, if you choose to be an empath, empaths are have exceedingly high constitutions and are resistant to diseases and fatigue. At higher AGI levels, empaths have special abilities to transfer health between themselves and another rabbit. The primary trait for an empath is constitution. So if I was to kind of say that and then kind of jump forward to what can a bunny do? Players may master the lore or experience described in including information and have appendix, though possible, kinds of entertainment. So if that is what I am describing, what is it? How do you respond as a player to that?
That's entertainment.
Anybody else want to play before we start to return to reality, improvisation, and space-time?
That's entertainment.
Luna, Adrian, are you there?
Give me that rabbit pain.
Yes, yes, we are here, we're here.
Wow.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Stephen, that was fun. Sorry we were a bit late, we were in another thing, but it was really nice to see the black and white shocks.
Did you see yourself on the stage with me kicking the boxes?
Yeah, that was really fun to kick the boxes. That was really lovely.
You managed to kick it directly into the camera as well, which was just right.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about that. I
No,
remember
that
that happened.
That was the best part of it. That was definitely the best part.
Actually, I'd love to see the video. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I can send it over to you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That was a very small stage, but it was really lovely, that space to perform. Nice. I don't know what happened to it. It's really closed now with the lockdown and everything.
Probably, yeah. I think David Ashford said that they had shifted their emphasis and they weren't doing performances anymore, like a lot of these places. But that was a couple of years ago. So I'm sure it's closed.
Like the meat market itself as well.
Sure,
has shifted, is shifting.
Maybe we should squat it.
That'd be fun, yeah. The meat market.
That'd be well, I don't know about that, but maybe the pub.
I think the meat market would be a bit smelly.
Meat market a bit smelly, and maybe it's got some viruses in it.
Well, you know, it is what it is in that regard. Yeah, it's funny. From speaking of viruses, viruses in gaming, it's such a common motif now in gaming that a virus comes and recreates not just a space and a social experience, but it recreates to some degree the way in which people relate to each other and relate to the spaces of their institutions. That it's curious to watch this current dry run, if we think of it like that, and how poorly we have responded to it, and our institutions have responded to a pandemic where a virus isn't that virulent compared to
They
what it
even
could
had
be.
the manual. They even had the manual.
They did, and they fucked it up big time. So let's hope that when the big one does come, when the apocalypse does arrive,
Translate us.
That
Translation of the apocalypse.
translate the apocalypse.
No, make a translation of apocalypse in like I don't know, poeticalypse or poetalypse, something like that. You know, Stephen, please correction reception.
Yes.
Just you didn't talk about your edition work. You know, all the books in Veers that you edited in different objects and that same connection. You have like 30 or 100, 200 books.
No, it's not 200. It's 110, 115.
10 books
Oh, it is worth saying that we're relaunching Veer as Veer 2. There will be, once we get the website up and running, we have a whole set of books. I think we have 3 or 4 already printed, and there's several more coming. And Rob, who is there, I can see him. He is come on board to do a special series that he's editing of the new Veer book. So we're relaunching Veer books into something new, which are mostly shorter texts now, shorter kind of works in progress and so on. So yeah, done a lot of that. Not sure what I can say about that really. I'm not sure it's going to hold back the apocalypse, though, to be honest.
Yeah, but a translation like in Kabbalah, you know, you make backward the things happen otherwise. You know, like if you read at the backwards the apocalypse in like without language, and that is that you know the problematic of vaccination of things. You know, when I work with autistic people or like really people out of language, it's like they are immune to language in a way, immune to all the you know the language, the construction of your personality, of your culture, of your meanings, of your desires. And then when we pass from the ground to the spirit, to the book, to the space, to the friendship, what kind of like a word, like we like poets, you know, we can afford crazy time of rehearsal of the, you know, that it's like the philosophers, the elixir philosophal, you know, the elixir that will bring health to other people. And I don't know, sometimes that connection of remember of like dolce stilo novo poetry mixed with constructive games and that like kind of patchwork of different levels of poetry can bring us a kind of protections against the imbecility of the persecution of the soul in a way, you know. That
that's a nice way to put it. I like the idea of you didn't use the word inoculation, but you said vaccination. Or maybe you did say inoculation, but inoculation.
Inoculation is perfect for we can make a review or like a kind of pamphlet or like inoculation.
Yeah,
That'd be interesting. Experimental translations under the idea of inoculation. Yeah.
Each of us spread like a kind of inoculation of like a violent truths and into all our sense and translate, and each one translate the other one, and at the end, like by example today we have like 24 different verse, and use that like a kind of mantra for in all the radios. We can make an action of radios in all the world, and I put in all the radios with the same mantra, like in different pulsation of the different size. Anyway,
I think that is more likely to bring about the apocalypse than not. Actually, I can see civilization collapsing under the weight of that somehow. I have been watching all the Terminator films again, and there's loads of them, and there's a Terminator TV series which is fantastic. and it does have remarkable relevance to where we are now. Much as I might hate to say that Arnold Schwarzenegger is a cultural icon, but to some degree he is in terms of that character. So I would certainly that's something else I'd like to do something with is some of these science fiction films. I've been watching the film adaptations actually of what's it called? The one where there's a viral outbreak. It's the biggest selling game franchise in history in terms of its adaptations into film and television. Resident Evil. I've been watching those as well, and they're surprisingly good for science fiction kind of disaster movie type things. But they have what they managed to get in those is a kind of gamification of the screen, or rather the big screen, translating up from the small screen in really interesting ways. So that might be something I'd like to kind of work on as well, in terms of thinking about how you make that jump from, let's say, small screen gaming poetry to big screen gaming poetry.
Yeah, do you know the theory? Like, is really the Juan Maldacena is an Argentinian physician. It's very like we are living in an hologram. You know, like it's really like now it's well known, and 10 years ago was completely crazy life, and then it's the same like history of like projection in Plato on in Orpheus, reads or myths, that we are a kind of projection of just one connection, right? You know, the two plates like tank, and that projection in the time and space and in the movement that the surround give to us, give that a kind of hallucination, and then we are an hallucination of a kind of shapes of others materials that we don't feel directly. Just like and I feel sometimes that we like poets and that connection of language and that word like know well or savoir-faire, comme on dit en français, of language, or in operation of like chirurgy of language, we can give a touch to that kind of elements of be free to confront yourself to the enemy or to the unknown in a way, you know, because the government, the political government, want to control the unknown with the known. We want to close the bodies. They have to, where you're close, all the people they cannot meet together. They try to control the invisible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's completely crazy because it's like the virus in the night. It doesn't exist. You know, it's like, and then it's like a mythology, but it touch something that is really like old, that kind of collective coordination for something. And that is for me that moment of London Under Construction and Writers Forum and just now is that moment when we are a little bit together, you know, like trying to think things otherwise than only read newspapers, you know, like.
Doesn't Marjorie Perloff, she talks about in terms of communication and computers and email communication and so on, or digital communication and the language around digital communication. She talks about the ones and the zeros used in a way to close down noise, that as we entered that sort of communication age, the powers that be made a distinct effort to control the way we use language and filtered out what she described as noise, which is the things which interfere with the clear communication of meaning. And that's what she finds is the most interesting aspect of digital communication at that point. It's in the 1990s. But it's certainly something that I think was there in that kind of London construction stuff, and in most of the work that I presume most of us do, which is about taking that noise aspect and doing something with it in a way that perhaps our political systems don't, or at least fail to regulate in the way that they would like to regulate, let's say.
Yeah. They're gaming us. We need to ungame.
That's where the ungaming comes in. Okay.
Yeah, no, man, the game, and that the same, the same game that Platon telling in the Time, what that kind of projection of something in the cave, and they project to us like a kind of the virus is outside. You cannot go outside, you cannot go make parties, but you have to go work, and you have to go to school, and you have to put the vaccine. It's completely fiction and science fiction and bad science fiction, like from the 80s. It's not Philip Dick. It's not like Asimov. It's another thing really bad, like. And then I think how we poets we can like contribute to not a kind of prevention or like a vaccination, a kind of translation in a way, just as translation to the humanity of the fear of the virus into poetry. What do you think, Stephen? Another number for resurrection of reception.
maybe, yeah. And that did make me think what you were saying there. I don't know why it came into my head, because I was thinking about these. One of the kind of gaming motifs that I find most interesting about using this sort of game books is that cheating is an integral part of them. So we've all done it who played these game books where you're offered two choices and you flip forward. You keep your finger in the paragraph you were in. You flip forward and say, "Oh, I die in that one. I'm not going that way." So I go back and retrace my way through the book and cheat your way through it. Doesn't always work, but it's built into the mechanisms in a way. You're invited to do it, and most people do it. And I like that idea that because that's a form of noise, and a form of, as you say, don't go outside because there's something dangerous outside. The game mechanics like that, and there are equivalents in board games and war games and role-playing games, are interesting in that they short circuit the rules, and they give us a way in which we, as navigators of a text, not necessarily a narrative, in these they generally are narratives, but there is an equivalent where we might look at non-narrative text to do that. There is certainly a way in which the challenging of the sovereignty of the rule system does bring something out in the language of, I would tend to talk about it as strategies of resistance in relation to William Rowe's poetry and things like that. The ways in which we rewire the control, the sort of languages of control that are brought to bear on the way we engage with knowledge or language or whatever.
And also he want to develop that kind of resistance of weapons to that kind of virus, and with the katab machine and the folding movement, like how we can manage language, like it's like the same like Chinese people like trying to combine some letters of ADN, REN to change the composition of the virus. And I think we sometimes when just like fixing us into the semantic meaning of poetry, we lose that idea. We are also working like chemical, physical, really like pure chirurgical work with the matter in a way, and that connection between the matter and the life.
Well, I mean, Carlos, you mentioned Christian Bach. Didn't he very famously in his
the Xenotext?
Yes, that's the one, Xenotext. Yeah, where he input poetry into the genetic code of a
bacteria or something.
Bacteria, yeah, or I think it might have been
it was a bacteria.
Yeah, which is, there's a whole series of questions of ethical interference with a life form, blah, 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 blah. But it certainly does, in what you're saying there, Martin, about that embedding of language into the real or into the living, it does raise some very serious questions, about how we can embed language in other things, very physically, not just in terms of the kind of personification thing we do with animals and objects and so on.
Yeah, but that the thing, the question of translation is really important, because we're not like just imitating virus in a way, you know, like poets, we're not imitate nothing. We're like connected thing that there never will, I don't know, at least for me, it's like that kind of, it's like the timbre or I don't know how you say in English, the timbre, the timbre of a sound of something, you know, it's an identity. It's like really yourself, and you are connected with different things, and you are vibrating with that. And I completely forgot what I want to say because yeah, because just was about that, you know, just forget the meaning, and to perceive the vibration of each uh, sound before language. And that, I think that is that for me, that I think like autism is a kind of really like a vaccination about language. I'm writing thing about it, but it will take me a while. But I don't know that. Yeah, that kind of put the people, the poets, like we have like a political presence to make in that way, or like to, like always, you know, like Empedocles or the Pythagoras or Epimenides, all the Archiloque, that poets from Greece, that they really involucrate in the resurrection or the reception, and you know, in working with the rules. There is a master of Socrates, call it like Denis, I don't remember exactly his name, that he stopped three like struggle in all the city in Athens, changing the pentatonic scale that people are all the musicians were playing for during the week. We change from Phrygian to Dorian, and then everyone calm. And in a moment, they asked the city asked to him about the backward. No, the city is too calm. We have to put some like a kind of madness in the city, and he inverts the pentatonic scale in Phrygian again. And that I think that capacity of changing frequencies and phases between language, we can try to make it all together now. I don't know what. Maybe another question before to jump into the.
It's a huge virus. It's a huge virus of meaning.
Yeah, meaning is yeah. I don't know. Meaning is a bacteria. It's not a virus. Meaning it's like you know, it works elsewhere. You know, meaning it helps you little. It's like kind of symbiosis with things. But, and it's a wonderful, yeah, difference that we always talk with Andres and Banter. That kind of difference between signification and meaning, you know, and also we were with Andres that last summer, going to the painting caves, and with all the confination stay in between the two first confination, and I saw that maybe that experience of painting cave, it was the same moment of the people start to hallucinate and create miracle. We talk the other side, and people after Auschwitz who have the a good food and natural health, the man transform themselves into woman in a way, and start to give milk. It's like, you know, like the pleroma, or the plenipotentiary state of the existence in a way. Sorry, my mystical reflection.
I'm not sure where that takes us. Yeah.
But yeah, with Andres and we're working in a new album about that. And I'm a little bit late, sorry, but so it's so wonderful, because we like start to hallucinate at the same time and create with the sound that and Andres discovered in one of in the cave of Cognac. The painting was in the loud side. It's not just the best way to look at them. It's just like, because there was a kind of reverberation, you know, of then that kind of inscription of elements, I think, is a movement of hallucination that the poet, in a way, lives in his first movement, you know, before to have his own style. You know, it's like boom, a kind of connection, a kind of piezoelectric thing.
Yeah. I think, Andreas, you better give us some language then, some filtered language.
But only if you want to. There's no pressure.
We can sound over it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to Judge Dredd my mirror.
It's working.
I should say Mooney my mirror.
Mm-hmm.
We're gamed. We're game.
Respect the badge. Respect the badge. Respect the badge.
We're gamed.
Fear the gun. Fear the gun.
You're allowed to break the rules.
Sentence maybe death.
Within the rules. Game. We're hunted by the rules of the game. Boing, boing. Boing, boing.
sulfuric acid, polyester terephthalate, polyester, polymethyl methacrylate, polyethylene terephthalate, polyvinyl chloride, butyl benzene. Sulfuric acid.
Coffee. The comms are down too.
You know what I want
Sure, they must be blocking her transmissions. Let's
white with a shade gray green. Nowadays, the things
Asterisk submitted 5G and S Rudy DSM-3-R asterisk dread asterisk 4 Commodore 64 asterisk link to diagnosis DSM-IFA OK 2000 MD asterisk diagnostic and statistical manual and disorders asterisk start much.
Try to use the minimum number of words possible when you bid. Do be careful about how you use your voice. Don't use body language. Don't give in to emotional reactions or breakdowns. Do be careful about how you use your voice. Don't use body language. Don't give in to emotional reactions or breakdowns.
Height and width of each object on the first-person shooter. Every R is Persian for Rory equals 10. For example, third row of bar. John is also Persian for Rory equals 10. JANG.
Asterisk K asterisk G asterisk var though it's better. A equals 32. J0 SEFT and 0 asterisk V don't pronounce VV equals 32. Alphabet asterisk.
I had play. That's it, now recording. Okay?
Declaring the variables over and over inside the nested for loop.
asterisk, DSMIV, don't, yet, DSMIV equals asterisk, asterisk, DSMIV, DSMII, Comics, colon, the direction of Spitzer, 0, DSMII, Park, Limit of Alexandria, colon, UINT, DRED inspired, asterisk, 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 I meant the code, the outer for, loop executes causing, the inner
Mir
for,
heute Nacht mein Herz vertauscht.
And also the
Hat
length
dich
of sort of
gelehrt.
syllables, which weren't really full, but they were touching.
Judge Hershey, corner of Burns and Frag Bertel. Man hat es mir genommen und mit Zähnen. Und hast dich wahr und verwandt. Was ich gewünscht habe und was mich zittern lässt, ist nicht mein Herz. Nur so ein etwas, ein von Lust und Schmerz. Vermischtes, das nicht auszusagen. Mein Herz. Soll ich nach dir fragen?
DRED inspired, asterisk, 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 I meant to code. The outer for loop executes causing the inner for loop to execute, law master. Once the inner for loop finishes, the outer loop checks to see Dolman if it needs to be executed again as Curx equals S dot Mooney asterisk mega dash CIT 8 semicolon S. Mooney magic.
You're right. Oh, great. And then went down to the ship, it needed to break her. And then went down to the ship, it needed to break her. Far from the godly sea, and we set up mast and sailed on that port ship. For keep the blood and our bodies also heavy.
Maybe the name of came from I meant that maybe the word apocalypse in Spanish, little bit, basic, circle, or problem, apocalypse, like a little problem, not too much, apocalypse, homeopathic. Homeopathic.
Sekarang kamu tidak boleh menghitung pakai ganjun. Mister yang breaking sini. Gaya Pak Mangku nganggu. Malik aparat pasada nganggu. Bapak Malik. Itu kerumunan itu umat beragama.
Just nature, west meets east. Side the sun of undead design, anti-event, and dense like in a line torpor, not an hallucination.
And the bong.
Yeah. My Instagram, because first it was like 40 minutes.
bring earth and new light.
Það er nú gaman að standa hérna með Matthew og
Even to break down to the ship. Ship, stay the wound, down to the wound, the wound, ship, stay, keep ship, stay light. And then the wound, down to the key to the ship, stay the wound, ship, stay. The wound is here, the wound is here.
Everyone.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Well,
Felicitaciones, André. Congratulations.
Sí.
Yes, absolutely. Fantastic.
And Stephen, wonderful work. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sticking with it. My God. I think
Thank you very much,
deserve a line
Stephen.
It
was great.
To recording. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very
Lovely
much.
to have to see you all. It's a really kind of friend sort of zone we have here, I think.
Yeah.
was lovely. A friendship space. So yeah. And thank you to Gazal for showing the piece that I should have remembered to show, that translation dub we did.
It wasn't actually recorded. I
Oh,
remember.
We should do it together again.
We
And record.
definitely should. Yes, yes.
Anyway, socially distanced for the time being.
We can do it on the Zoom.
Well, I have to leave, guys. But well, it was amazing sharing with you another week. So see you next
week. Yeah.
I'll stop recording, but I can leave the session if you want for a while. Extended cachondeo.
You later, I check out as well. So love